Marjorie Taylor Greene had two opportunities to actually stop this from going there. Number one, she could have just not said it because it was against the rules. Number two, she was given an opportunity to apologize and she was indignant and refused to apologize. And so once Chair Comer decided that he was not going to do what he was supposed to do, which was to enforce the rules, then I decided to basically question him.
Hello and welcome to the Bulwark Podcast. I'm your host, Tim Miller. It's Thursday. I'm just so delighted to be here with Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, Democrat from Texas. She represents part of Dallas. And we're both from St. Louis, I found out.
Yes.
And,
I've got to ask you the St. Louis question, though.
Where I went to high school, I left before fourth grade. I left in fourth grade, girl. I went to Academy of the Sacred Heart up to elementary school out in St. Charles.
Now I know you for real are from St. Louis, though.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, I got a lot of cousins. I know the high school question. So I've been wanting to do this for a while. Ever since you talked about classified documents being in Trump's shitter, I was like, we got to get her on the Bulwark Podcast. And so we've been scheduling it. And just as the news gods shone on us last week, this happened.
I'm just curious, just to better understand your ruling, if someone on this committee then starts talking about somebody's bleach blonde, bad built butch body, that would not be engaging in personalities, correct?
A what now?
All right. So I got to know. So where bleach blonde, bad built butch body? What kind of work went into that? Was that just off the cuff? Was there a team? Was there a speech writing team involved? A text chain?
No, none of that. It was all me. And so one of my favorite people in the entire world was my granny. And my granny, if anybody knows anything about old Black women, like they really say whatever's on their minds, and they don't filter anything out. And so my granny used to call people bad built. That was like a theme that she would do. And so I was looking over, I did have some B's in my mind. So I was looking at her, and so I was like, she's bleach blonde. And then I thought of my granny, bad built. And then we all know that she has some masculinity about her. And I was like, butch body. So no, I came up with it all by myself. I think my team probably would have been very nervous to write something like that for me. Okay. So it was me.
I thought maybe there was like a group text you had going, and I was like thinking maybe I could get on that. But all right, I hear you. We had, I just have to say, earlier this week we had Tom Nichols on. Different. We're kind of the same. Not our generation. I think norms, mores of the Congress. He was clutching his pearls a little bit. Well, what do you say to folks that are like, we shouldn't stoop to their level, shouldn't be calling them names, the old Michelle Obama line? Like, what's your response to all that?
Well, first of all, it's a false equivalency. Marjorie Taylor Greene had two opportunities to actually stop this from going there. Number one, she could have just not said it because it was against the rules. Number two, she was given an opportunity to apologize and she was indignant and refused to apologize. And so once Chair Comer decided that he was not going to do what he was supposed to do, which was to enforce the rules, then I decided to basically question him. I did not say anything directly to her. I didn't even mention her name. I didn't look at her. I didn't do anything. I asked the chair a question, and really it was so that the chair could think. I don't expect for there to be any lessons learned by Marjorie Taylor Greene because she just doesn't care to learn lessons. But I would hope that my chairman says, listen, I don't want to be in any more songs, whether it's a country song or a trap song. Like, I don't want to be in the middle of this. I think I just need to handle my committee because I wanted to exemplify for him how far it could potentially go. She didn't come to committee today, so I don't know. But everything was a lot smoother without her there.
Yeah. I mean, the eyelashes thing was obviously racist, it wasn't, she wasn't exactly subtle about it. So I was not, I thought it was fine. I understand that complaint. It's look, we had to deal with this. Like back when I was working for Jeb, there's this convo that we had, which was the old cliche, like, oh, you don't want to wrestle with a pig or you're going to get mud on you. And like, that was our attitude going against Trump for like 2 weeks. And then we're like, no, like mud's going to get on us regardless. Like now, like this is how these guys are going to play. And so I don't know. I mean, how do you kind of think about that as a Democratic Party thing?
Yeah, I am consistently hearing people say the Democrats are weak. Yeah. And it couldn't be further from the truth. And part of the reason that I think that they have this perception that Democrats are weak is because you have these out of control bullies such as Marjorie, and no one decides to really beat her back. And I think that while the B6 movement, while it was an interesting way to put words together.
Is that what we're calling it now? The B6 movement?
It's the B6 movement,
okay,
absolutely.
That's good to know.
And B6 is way better than J6. But nevertheless, with it, I think what it was a release for people. I think that is why you see songs of all genres, you see skits, you see memes, you see all these things because people have been frustrated with her for a very long time. And this was an opportunity to unite against a bully and make sure that you take her down. I can't say that I ever walked into Congress really wanting to demean another person, whether it was another woman or anything like that. But I also did not walk into Congress expecting that someone would disrespect me to my face and expect me to sit there and just take it.
Yeah. I'm with you on this. I just think you have to push back. And I think a lot of people that talk about this stuff don't realize like just the degree of the clown show that you've been subjected to on the Oversight Committee. I mean, for folks who don't suffer through this, like this has been going on for months. They have nothing. They have literally not. They're wasting everybody's time. They have these show trials going on, and I think you've done a good job pushing back. Congressman Moskowitz, which we had on, has done a good job of pushing back. But even still, and just talk about like what it's been like to be in this just kind of absurd committee when you're supposed to be serving the public.
No, it has been so frustrating. Today, I actually pointed out how ineffective this Congress has been. We were having a hearing where they were attacking federal workers and complaining about telework. And basically, if you telework, according to them, you're not working at all. And I wanted to make the point that, listen, we show up. We're not allowed to telework here. And we have been more ineffective than we've ever been. So clearly showing up ain't going to necessarily solve the problem either. But that's what it's been. It's been just full of hypocrisy. It's been full of messaging to make sure that Trump knows that they're standing by their guy instead of focusing on the people that sent us here to work, right? Trump can't vote for anybody on my committee, but there are at least 700,000 people that voted for each and every person to sit on this committee. And constituents such as mine, Eugene Gates, that lost his life, a postal worker that was working for 37 years for the post office and died because he overheated. That falls under our purview. But I've yet to be able to have a hearing on something such as that. And so there is real work that we could be doing. We could be figuring out how we can strengthen our military, which I'm excited to say that I actually was able to get a bill passed called the Readiness Act out of Oversight last week. But there's so much work that really needs to be done. And it's frustrating because they make up conspiracies about the president. They decide to have hearings that basically are nothing more than Russian propaganda, finding out that the entire basis of their rationale for wanting to impeach the president of the United States is because of information that they got from a Russian spy. Yeah, that really makes sense, right? Like these are the people that are running our country. And while it's funny to some extent, it's really scary. And it's a matter of you have to laugh to keep from crying because these people are truly dangerous.
Yeah. Do you talk to any of the Republicans on the committee that are still attached to reality? I mean, like, is there any shame left over there, or have all those folks been kind of flushed out?
For the most part, they're gone.
Yeah.
Behind closed doors, some of them will say like, hey, we know it's wild, but it's what we've got to do if we're going to win our primaries.
Yeah.
But you see the Kim Bucks of the world. I mean, I have a Freedom Caucus member who says that this place is just too much for him and for him to leave. That tells you how bad it's gotten.
Yeah.
But he was ridiculed for not wanting to vote for an election denier to be the Speaker of the House. He was ridiculed because he felt as if you don't just wield impeachment as if it's one of Oprah's gifts that you just hand out to everybody. Like he felt like this institution required more. And as a trained lawyer, former prosecutor, he felt like they were playing with fire and really setting a terrible precedent. And he just didn't want to be part of it anymore. Now, we can disagree on tons and tons of policy, but it tells you how bad things have gotten.
Yeah, back when I was a Republican, Ken Buck was one of the crazy ones. I was supporting his opponent in the primary for the Senate. We were like, this guy is insane. Like, he was running against Jane Norton was running against him, who was more of a mainstream Republican back at the time. Anyway, I want to get into a couple of issues with you, but first, you did go up to New York. Is that right? You went up to New York this week? It was funny because I was calling for this last week. I was like, all of these little emotional support Republicans are up there doing these press conferences, and it might be time to again push back a little bit, like not let them have these platforms. So what did you see up there, and what was the point of you going?
Yeah, so I went to raise money. Thank you, New York.
Yeah.
New York is always a great place to do that.
JasmineCrockett.com.
Exactly, right? But no, I was in town. I am an attorney. I do miss the courtroom every single day. I did criminal defense work specifically. And so I said, well, I'm going to go see what all the fuss is about, especially since people couldn't show up to work on time last week. So let me see what's going on. And interestingly enough, the person that was testifying for the defense at that time, Bob Costello, had actually just come before me on the weaponization committee the week before. I was not a fan of his then. I wasn't a fan of his when he was in the courtroom, but I appreciated that the courtroom is a more controlled environment than anything you ever find on Capitol Hill under the control of the Republicans. And so Judge Merchan stood his ground, was very strong. I felt like, he seems to be a great jurist. It's one thing when pundits are commenting and things like that. It's another thing when you can actually look and see the judge's demeanor. And I also was trying to figure out what was the defense's strategy with putting Bob Costello on the stand, because I personally believe that the jury heard some things that were more harmful than helpful, which is the impression that I got out of him when he came before our committee. And I think for the jury to have that be the last thing that they heard, I think that it was problematic. And I think that the state is going to seize on some really good opportunities to talk about things that they probably wouldn't have got into evidence, such as some of these emails where it seems pretty clear that Trump was attempting to instigate or really put Michael Cohen into a bad situation. He or Giuliani. And I don't think that that's the last thing that you want the jury to believe, as you've had jurors that have said, I don't know if I can serve on this jury because they were afraid. The idea that he continues to lodge threats, even though they may be thinly veiled, or sometimes they're just direct, I don't think that that's what you want a jury to be left with, is their impression of your client. And I think that some people, if they're on the fence, they may say, I just don't like this guy. I think he's a bad guy. And I think that their last witness only kind of solidified that for them.
Yeah, I hope you're right. I want to talk about kind of a related issue to this. The president's struggling a little bit with black voters. If you look at the numbers, if you believe the numbers, I was listening to you on the Breakfast Club with Charlemagne, and he was conceding that. So it's not just polls, not just me conceding that. He was the one that was asking you about this too and saying that he hears it. Trump's out there kind of doing the courts are coming after me and black people like me because they know what it's like to be treated poorly, and this kind of racist nonsense. But so I wonder what you think about that argument. Like, is that seeping through to anybody that the whatever the state that is the feds are coming after Trump and it's not fair? And if not that, like, what are some other issues that you think explain the soft support for the president in that community?
I don't think that people are saying, you know what, I'm going to leave Joe Biden and go for Trump. I just don't think that droves of black people are doing that. I do believe that there is voter apathy, and I think that it really is across the board. I think that it's being highlighted specifically about black folk because Black people are a large portion of the coalition for the Democratic Party. Yeah. And so I think that that's why it's being discussed. But I think that I hear more from people just really feeling a bit fatigued and not feeling as if anyone cares about them. And ultimately, when people head to the polls, they head to the polls because they are determined to vote for somebody that they absolutely believe will take care of them, whether it's true or not. It's the person that they believe will make their lives better. And, I think that this election is really going to boil down to the issues. I think that most people that show up to the polls won't necessarily show up because they're so in love with Trump or that they're so in love with Biden. I mean, the reality is that when you look at Trump and his primaries, Trump was never getting the type of support that Biden was getting from his party, right? Mm-hmm. Regardless of the fact that there are those in the coalition that may be breaking off, you're seeing the primaries where President Biden was getting 80 or 90%. But then again, you're seeing where Nikki Haley has been out of this race and ended up getting I think 25% here recently. So there's been a little bit of pushback from mainstream Republicans. And I think that, the president may end up with a different coalition. I think it's one of the reasons that he is going after those Haley voters. But I think that it's also important for Black people to understand what has been done to help you, right? And I think that this president and this administration has done so much, not this term, because clearly we ain't doing nothing in the House. Right. But prior to. And so I think that they were so busy keeping their heads down and working that they really didn't take time to run their laps and tell people what they've done or why your life is better. So for instance, I'll tell you, we had a conversation with the vice president. And, I was like, hey, we are all in. We support you. We love you. We know you're doing great work. But literally, there were 2 members of Congress that were sitting at this table that had their student loan debt relieved. And you know what? They did not know why. 2 sitting members of Congress were trying to figure out if something was a glitch. They didn't know what happened. They were searching everywhere. They were calling everywhere. They could not pay their student loans. And then they found out ultimately that their student loan debt had been relieved. And it was by the administration. And I said, listen, we got to tell people, when people have over $100,000 that is being removed from their backs, they need to know why and who did it. And so, just pushing those messages out, pushing out the message about record low unemployment for African Americans, pushing out the message that when it comes to investing in HBCUs, there's no one that's ever invested to this level, $7 billion. The most that Trump ever did was $253 million. They have the data, they have the facts. It's just about making sure that Black people know that there has been a specific and intentional focus on making sure that their lives are improved. When we talk about the child tax credit, that was so big. But you know what? People were getting $400 a month per child, and they didn't know why or what was happening, because this administration didn't slow down people's money by saying, make sure you put my name on the check any of those gimmicky things. But those are the things that have stuck with people.
Yeah. All right. My former Republicans got to come out for a second. I got to pick on you. The student loan thing, I don't know. You could win me over on certain situations about the student loan thing, but that story you tell me, isn't that just a sign that this is not effective? It's not working. The people that are getting this relief, don't even know about it. And then on top of that, you have other groups of people. If I didn't go to college and I was struggling with inflation and I see a news story today on the nightly news, it's we're giving another $1 billion out to people that went to grad school to relieve their loans. That might piss me off. So I don't know. What do you think about this?
Listen, I think first of all, they absolutely needed to make sure that people were being informed, and they have now started sending out letters so that people know. What I consistently heard specifically in my district would be people saying, it's amazing how the federal government can bail out these big corporations. They can help everybody except for us. And at a time when there is record inflation, at a time when people are really struggling and they're saying, we don't know how we can buy a home. We don't know if we can buy a home. This is right on time. And when we're talking about something like the wealth gap and what it looks like for African Americans. This is something that is allowing that wealth gap to actually be decreased, and it has been decreased because we know that there was a disproportionate impact in a negative way on African Americans when it comes to this debt. That is why it was so important, because this was a way of trying to help people that absolutely want to move forward without having this on their back, because a lot of people didn't necessarily, end up in Trump shoes and go to college. I mean, and daddy had a bunch of money. Like, not everybody was born that way. And when you live in a society where they try to convince you that the only way to move up or the only way to somehow be qualified is to have a college degree, then this is what you end up with. Now, I appreciate exactly what you're saying, because I actually don't subscribe to this. I think that people should grow up and do whatever it is that makes them happy. I became a lawyer because I wanted to help people in this way, but goodness knows I would have preferred not to have any student loan debt and have to go to law school. But we need people in trades, and I've been very supportive of all of that. In fact, one of the bills that I've pushed forward with, and Republicans are blocking us on, is when we look at Pell Grants, making sure that you don't just get access to a Pell Grant if you are attending a 4-year institution. But if you have decided that you want to go into the trades, or you want to go and get into a field where you only need a community college degree, then we want to make sure that you have the access too, because ultimately we're contributing to making sure that you become a good taxpayer. And that's what I want, is a lot of good taxpayers.
All right. 2 more things real quick, then I'll let you go. One of the things that I thought was the most compelling thing on your Charlemagne interview was discussing SNAP benefits and how small they are. A lot of people don't know. You could retell that story, and how Republicans are trying to take that. And since that interview, I think it was just this morning, or maybe yesterday, it came out, the CBO kind of scored the farm bill that the Republicans are pushing, and it's increasing the deficit. So it's like fiscally irresponsible, and it's cutting SNAP benefits. And so it's just absolutely crazy. You're on the House Ag Committee, so maybe just talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, thanks so much for bringing it up, because we never get to go viral talking about SNAP. But no, it's really important. At a time when people are struggling, you again mentioned inflation. We know that the first thing that people are talking about is the cost of food. So the average person has no idea that when it comes to SNAP benefits, you only get $6 a day. Now, would Democrats probably like to at least increase that to $7 a day? Absolutely. Yeah. But you know what? The solution that the Republicans have come up with is that they actually want to cut about $30 billion in SNAP benefits. And here's the deal. You can cut it all you want to. I mean, if you can get the votes, which we know they can't count. So I'm going to just tell you, they ain't going to be able to get it done. But even still, cutting SNAP benefits, they act as if, oh, well, it's another kind of racial trope that they kind of throw out there, because they want to make it seem as if it's the inner city Black and brown folk that are just lazy and refuse to go to work so that they can get $6 a day to eat. I don't know who would opt to do that, but this is what they put out there. When the facts are that rural America actually uses more SNAP benefits than urban America. And honestly, most of the Republicans represent rural areas. And so my fight is not just a fight for my district, but I'm fighting for their districts while they're tearing them down. In addition, if you care about farmers don't just go out and say, you know what, give me that broccoli. Like, it just doesn't appear overnight, right? So you pull this money out of the ecosystem. As farmers are making their plans, we know that that's less money to be in the ecosystem for these farmers that are trying to make a living as well. And we know right now that our farms are struggling. So it's a lose-lose for everybody. I don't know why they feel as if it's the way to go, but I'm telling you right now, I can't support a bill that would take literal food out of the mouths of Americans.
All right. So last thing, you're from Texas. You're in Texas there. I've been riled up about how Governor Greg Abbott have pardoned Daniel Perry for the murder of Garrett Foster, Black Lives Matter protester, who was exercising his constitutional right to carry a firearm, who didn't do anything. Perry drives into the crowd with his truck, then shoots him in cold blood, and Greg Abbott pardons him. And then you have this story over in Florida where Roger Fortson, who's a Black 23-year-old airman, a veteran, is in his home in Okaloosa County when the sheriff's department gets a tip that there's some domestic situation happening. It wasn't happening in Forston's apartment. It wasn't happening in Fortson's apartment, but the cops come in and shoot him. dead, and the body camera footage shows that he they didn't ask him to drop his weapon until after he was already on the ground. So when you see situations like these, I'm just wondering kind of what your reaction is.
Yeah, I mean, I wish that I could say I was surprised. Like, I wish that it was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this happened. But instead, it's more frustrating that people continue to put a person like this in power. I mean, he's not hiding what he's doing. It's not like he did this, late at night and when nobody would see it and tried to hide it and deny it or blame it on somebody else. He is blatantly telling you that he doesn't believe in law and order. He is blatantly telling you that it's okay to kill another human, I guess, at least so long as it's a Black person. I mean, I don't know. Like, when you talk about the numbers and the president, this is the party that literally has people that are saying, yeah, your Black life doesn't matter. And that's why you've seen Black folk be in the streets and do things like say Black lives matter. Because let me tell you, this country was outraged when they heard of a certain governor killing her dog. You couldn't find anybody that wasn't talking about it. Everybody posted pictures of their dogs and things like that. But I haven't seen anywhere near the level of outrage about the fact that there is an officer that went through the process. We're not talking about, somebody just banished him. He went through the process. He was prosecuted. He was convicted, and the governor decided to overturn it. And there's been no outrage. That's why Black people get so upset, because it seems like dogs will always have lives that matter more than ours.
Yeah, it's pretty rough. Okay. Jasmine Crockett, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the Bulwark Podcast. Please come back soon. Keep on fighting the good fight on that oversight committee with all those clowns, and, go Cardinals, I guess. We'll see you soon.
Absolutely. Bye.
I'll be sticking around here for a mailbag on the other side. All right, mailbag time. Thank you to those who sent in questions. The questions are way improved, much shorter. The readers of the mailbag, super excited. Very positive feedback for the gerbils back at Bulwark HQ in DC. Remember, it's Bulwark Podcast at thebulwark.com. If you have questions, comments, well, not comments, actually. If you have questions, insults, life advice. I want to talk here. This is kind of a combo question and life advice. It comes from Mike in Minneapolis. Is it crazy to contemplate emigrating somewhere else if, God forbid, Trump wins in November? I'm interested that Mike spelled emigrating, emigrating, like he's from Britain. So it might not be crazy to contemplate emigrating if you're not American. Though it's that's an acceptable usage, but I think down home, regular folk are using just calling it immigrating, but we'll see. Here's my answer to that question. I ain't going fucking anywhere. All right. I ain't going anywhere. I am staying. I'm staying. I'm not going to be run out of my country by these freaks. So hopefully we don't have to think about this. I get the jokes. I don't begrudge anybody, particularly somebody who wants to do their golden years in Portugal or Uruguay or wherever. That's fine. And one of my besties, she moved to Italy and did an eat, pray, love thing and met a boy and decided to stay there. That's a cool option if you want to give that a try. Maybe you'll have as much luck as she did. But, that's not for me. All right. I'm happy here. I have a great life, good family. And if Donald Trump wins this thing, we're going to beat this bastard back again. All right. I didn't want to have to do it. I wanted to stop thinking about Donald Trump November, whatever the day after the election was in 2016. I remember thinking about this the night before the election. I remember thinking, the thing I was the most excited about Hillary winning in 2016 was that I would not have to send another just little millimeter of brain space, of brain matter on this fucking asshole. Like, that was the thing I was most excited about, freeing my mind, reading books, to thinking about other things. that wasn't the life we were given. All right. And so we're stuck thinking about them. And if I got to think about them for 4 more years or 8 more or whatever, then we'll fucking think about them for 4 more years or 8 more. All right. People have been dealt worse hands than that in history. And so, I think that the threats will be really great. I think that the risk to people, particularly immigrants, migrants in this country, is going to be extremely high. I think he's going to target some political foes. Knock on wood, not me. I think that trans people and young women, particularly poor women that want access to medical care, are going to have a tough time. And there's going to be a lot of people that have a tough time. But this will be something we'll continue to need to fight. And by the way, if he loses, this is going to be something that we're going to continue to need to fight. So, I don't know. If Donald Trump wins again, I'm planning on batting down the hatches. I'm not letting him take my Parkway Po boys away from me. I'm not letting him take away my trips to see Galactic at the Tips away from me. I'm not letting him take it. I'm just not. So I'm not going anywhere. You shouldn't go anywhere unless you want to. I mean, it's your life. But I think that particularly those of us that live in blue enclaves with resources and with privilege are going to have an obligation to do what we did the last 8 years and try to get the country back on the right track. And that's what I plan to do. All right, a couple quick ones. A couple other quick ones. Eddie asked, what would a reasonable Republican position on income inequality be? Do you even agree it's a problem? I had to answer this one because literally the Jeb Bush super PAC was called Right to Rise for a reason. It was because we acknowledged that income inequality was a problem. Stupid us. We thought that income inequality and alleviating that and trying to help working class Americans improve their lot was going to be an appealing message. As the party made a populist turn, right? Isn't that right? Isn't that what people wanted in populism? They want greater access to capital formation, to the ability to earn money, to the ability to grow their careers. That's what we thought. That was dumb, it turns out, because Donald Trump talking about hating on immigrants and rapists and how Mexicans are rapists and how Hillary should go to jail and how we should build a wall. That ended up being a more appealing populist message. It turned out in 2016. But there's been a long debate on the right about this question of income inequality. Obviously, there's some, kind of pure libertarian types that don't believe that there should be any limits on the wealth that the rich create and that we should let the markets decide all this. There's certainly some Republicans that think that way, but there was, kind of a robust, it was called Reformocon discussion between 2012 and 2016 about what are some of the ways that we can, try to alleviate the income inequality problem. The child tax credit was one of those things. Joe Biden embraced that until the Republicans killed it 2 years ago, but there were some Republicans that were with him on that. There were other issues about, ways that we could reform and change the tax code that would help people on the lower end of the spectrum, working class folks, make sure their tax burden was lowered, make sure they had more access to an ability to rise up the income scale. That's what the kind of Right to Rise theme came from. You can just go back and Google Reformocon or Google Jeb's proposals for 2015 and 16. You might not like them, but I do think that there was a understanding and agreement that this was an issue and that it led to, for me, part of it, I think the liberals talk about this more under the kind of rubric of fairness. For me, it was also just kind of about the cultural fabric. It felt like the resentments that were growing as type of this. Like there's a fairness element to this, of course. There's a social responsibility. There's a responsibility to the community, of course. But you want people to feel like they have an opportunity to improve their lot, and you want people to feel like they're not living in some dystopian period where you've got the Rockefellers up top that are living however they want, and the rest of us are forced to let each other eat cake. So I think that back in the before times there was a robust conversation around this, but here we are, not so much anymore. I bet JD Vance might tell you that he has some thoughts about this. Maybe in a post-Trump world, there's like an imaginary Republican populism that does care about this. That's just kind of hard to see that happening when you've got the actual real world Republican populists focusing on like imaginary conspiracies about how Donald Trump Donald Trump was almost assassinated by Joe Biden, and how vaccines don't work. It's kind of hard to imagine how they pivot that into responsible policy rubric around income inequality, but we can hope. Lastly, Ryan asked, why doesn't the Biden campaign highlight the work the cabinet and other people in various leadership positions are doing? It seems to me Biden has high quality people around him that are effective at getting things done. I agree with that. I agree. I don't really know. I've asked, and it's almost like even the Biden cabinet people know that there's. It's almost sometimes when you ask a question, you get a sense that there's something people aren't telling you. I hope you don't ever get that sense in this podcast. I'm doing my best to just tell you everything I know. I don't always know everything, but I'm trying to tell you everything I know. It's a nice part about not having future career prospects in the government. But I don't know. When I talk to people around the Biden admin, I never feel like I get a satisfying answer to this question. And I don't know if there's some personality elements or if there's something else that I'm missing. But there's some of this. Obviously, Pete's out there some. You could see Pete out there way more. Gina Raimondo, and you can just go down the list. I think that obviously Biden has a good relationship with Secretary of State Blinken. And you do see a lot of him out there. That's not really relevant so much to domestic politics, but I wish other people had the rope that Blinken does to go out there. And I think that it's something that hopefully is coming. And it's something that I can tell you that you better believe that whenever anybody with any decision-making power on this stuff talks to me or Sarah or anybody in our orbit, this is something we're telling them. They more is more, and they need to get the high-quality people out carrying these messages more. I think that Jasmine Crockett, who we just had on, is a compelling messenger. Particularly, I think in this question of how does the Biden administration reach voters that are less engaged, that maybe get news off of social media, her ability to talk in those sound bites and to talk like a normal person, I think is useful. And so it's good that they have some of those folks out there, but we could see some more. All right. That's it for the mailbag today. We'll be back tomorrow with Bulwark Fave from the dark side, A.B. Stoddard. We'll be seeing you there. We'll hopefully bring a bright and shiny weekend podcast with A.B. Stoddard. Is that possible? We're going to do our best for you. We'll see you all back here tomorrow.